All right,
right.
well, you're live.
Hello and welcome. Carrie here from Healing Humanity, the Power of a Proper Human Diet with Lynn from Midlife Carnivore. How's it going, Lynn?
It's going great. Just
Awesome.
just just got home from a big trip and flew in last night, but doing good.
Great. So we're looking forward to talking about this today. Change Your Diet, Change Your Mind, written by Dr. Georgia Ede. How diet affects your mental health. This is full disclosure. This is the first book review I've done, but I think we'll have fun with it, Lynn. I love the book. I
Oh my
absolutely
gosh, I
love
did
it.
too.
I I always feel like I have to give this disclosure. Like, I'm not just promoting this. I have no affiliate links for it. I've been telling people to go buy it. I'm
Right.
legitimately promoting it and mentioning it just because my own story, I guess, and my own sort of battles with mental health and depression I've had over the years. I was very fortunate. Dr. Tony Hampton introduced me to Dr. Georgia Eden. I had her on the channel, and I told her of this book. Like, I was searching for the answers that are in this book for most of my adult life. I
Oh
suffered
yeah.
from depression, anxiety. I was on every sort of medication, and my only problem with this book, and I told Dr. Ede about that when I interviewed her, was why didn't you write this like 20 years ago? If I would have had this,
Seriously.
if I would have had it 20 years ago,
Oh yeah, a little over 20 years ago, I ended up in a psychiatric hospital.
wow,
And no, I wish that I had known all of the things in this book. It would have saved me so much and saved my family so much.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I was on every medication for depression and anxiety for years. I found keto, and that sort of helped me a little bit, but nothing like until I found carnivore. What could you maybe give us a little background on you, Lynn, just for those that aren't familiar, people watching from my channel?
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Lynn. My channel is Midlife Carnivore, and I have been on the carnivore diet since end of May of last year. I had to retire from nursing because of a massive flare of my mast cell activation syndrome, and my health. I was totally disabled, and I was quickly becoming a cripple, and my weight had gotten to close to 350 pounds, and I went on the carnivore diet. My husband suggested I went on the carnivore diet. I could was afraid to leave my house because I was reacting to everything: throat swelling, dizziness, nausea, all these anaphylactic type reactions, and just pain head to toe, like everything that could go wrong, heart, everything, brain. Yeah, and so I've started my channel just for accountability, and I've since gotten to know you and so many others in the carnivore community, and my health has just taken a complete U-turn. It's been incredible.
I apologize if you just said this, but like roughly how long have you been on carnivore now?
So it's been a little over 9 months.
Wow, awesome.
Yeah.
I am I'm precisely 1 week shy of a year.
Yay.
Yeah, happened so quickly. So much happened so quickly, but yeah,
Yeah.
one of the big things along the journey over the course of the year was the privilege of getting to talk to Dr. Georgia Ede, and then we did a depression and mental health live stream with her. And we really sort of dug into the book, and Dr. Chafee and Dr. Hampton were on that one as well. So it was really interesting. But I guess maybe one of the things we can start off talking about is, well, first of all, if you're watching from my channel, go check out Lynn's channel. Shout out. I left a link in the description
Yeah.
below.
And vice versa. Probably all of you on my channel are probably already subscribed to Carrie.
Right. Um, I was going to say also, I have to add the link. I think I forgot to add the link, but Dr. Ede's website is diagnosisdiet.com. I will add that to my description.
Yeah, I'll add it to mine. The book description is in mine. The book link to order the book is in the description on my channel, but I'll add her website as well.
Great. So I guess maybe we could start off talking just a little bit background on the author herself. So it's Dr. Georgia Ede, and the cool thing I like about her is I saw many different mental health professionals over the years getting prescribed medications and things like that. The thing I love about her is she's looking at things completely different than anyone I ever spoke to. All of the
Yes.
mental health folks that I've talked to, none of them ever mentioned nutrition. So
Right.
she's doing things a lot differently than most people. Plus, she's just, I don't know what it is about her. There's some people you encounter in life where you're like, that's just a really great person, and they have this temperament where they're just kind of soothing. I guess that's her profession.
Well, I'd be a little worried about a psychiatrist or a psychologist who made you feel stressed out and uncomfortable.
Very true. Yeah.
It tells me that they don't have it figured out yet.
Right. She's just based on that, she's good at her job. It's almost like when I was speaking with her, like you're talking to like Mr. Rogers or Bob Ross or something. You just have that soothing, calming, just a great spirit too. So
Yeah.
really enjoy talking to her. But I love the fact that we've talked about this before, and Lynn's been a huge help with the documentary. And one of the things I've talked about before is this thought about positive deviance, which sounds like a bad thing. It's like a positive good, deviant bad. But people that are doing something drastically different than the
Right.
masses, and they're succeeding, and that's what Dr. Georgia Ede is doing. The vast majority of people in her profession, the only thing they do is they'll do talk therapy and they'll do medication. And it's mostly just
Right.
medication is the answer. And she's stepping kind of away from the traditional treatments and diving into something drastically different, which has to take a lot of courage for someone to do. You're going against the grain, and all of your colleagues and people you're working with are like, "Ooh, she's kind of the weird one out."
Yeah, well, and it seems like it's her branch is it nutritional psychiatry is a fairly new branch of psychiatry.
Yeah.
And it sounds like it's kind of in its infancy. So hopefully this book will interest more people in the profession to learn about this and start incorporating these principles into their practice.
Yeah, I really hope so. I was doing an interview with a gentleman a while back who had bipolar disorder, and I was doing some research about bipolar disorder. I have some family members that have bipolar, and I found this. It was Reddit. For people that aren't familiar with Reddit, it was the website Reddit, and it was an Ask Me Anything, which is kind of popular on Reddit. They'll have celebrities or doctors or certain people. They'll go on there and they'll say, "I'm a doctor. Ask me anything." Well, they had this one, and it was for I think it was National Bipolar Day, and they gathered 60 experts, doctors and experts that specialized in bipolar disorder and mental health disorder. And it was, you could ask them anything. So there were 1,600 comments of people asking them questions.
Wow.
And I was preparing for this interview with this gentleman that had bipolar, and I wanted to see, like, what are the experts talking about? These are the legit bipolar experts. And using some of the latest tools and technology we have at hand, ChatGPT, I was able to plug that whole thing in with all 1,600 comments. I was like, give me the most prevalent one, give me the most popular one. And the most popular one was, of course, medication. There
Yeah.
was a little bit of talk about talk therapy, but there was not one single mention of ketogenic keto nutrition. Not
Not surprising.
one. Not
Yeah, not
one.
surprising.
And there were 60 doctors and experts, and they actually listed and linked to each one of them. They're like legitimate psychiatrists and doctors that specialize in bipolar disorder. Not one of them mentioned nutrition. It makes me kind of mad, just because I struggled for so long. You struggled, Lynn, and I've talked to so many other people that have struggled for so long. And almost all of these people, they go on a ketogenic diet and it reverses. And
Yeah.
for like our friend Todd Bachnes, he gets so fired up, and I love it. I feel the passion. He's like, everything for years and years, my whole life I was depressed. And he's like, in a matter of weeks, eating a proper human diet, his depression
Oh,
is
yeah.
gone.
Well, and now that I've read this book, I feel like I have a better understanding of why.
Right.
It's like I've heard so many people talk about the improvements they've received in their mental health after starting a ketogenic diet. And it's like, it was a big mystery as to why. And now that I've read this book, it's like, oh, it makes complete sense. And she goes into so much good detail about it. If you're a science nerd like me, you'll love it.
I agree. And the thing I love too is, it's when you first pick this book up, you're getting your money's worth. It's a big, heavy book.
Yeah.
But I was worried, like, she actually sent me a copy 2 weeks before I did an interview with her. It was before this was even released. It was a PDF. And I'm like, I don't know if I'm going to get through this. I couldn't put it down. And I'm being sincere. I was like, the way she wrote this, it's not like too heavy on the science where you're going to get bored and kind of glaze over it. It had me hooked in. Maybe it had me hooked in more just because of my history. I don't know. But I couldn't put it down. I just kept reading it. And I really.
And I know that there was maybe 1 or 2 chapters at the beginning where she did go a little bit more like into brain anatomy, brain metabolism, and she was almost apologetic about it,
Yeah.
like, hang in there with me. If you're not really into all the deep science, just skip ahead to the key points at the end. But I really dove into those chapters because, as with my background in nursing, I was really, really interested. And I was sending, as I was reading through this, I was taking photos with my phone and sending clips from the book to a friend of mine whose husband is currently in a facility. And I guess the therapist said probably one of the worst cases of depression they've ever seen.
Mm.
And it's like to be able to offer some hope for somebody who's that severe, and for the family that they don't know if they're ever going to get the husband, the father back.
Mm.
It's amazing. It's like, I feel like the message in the book and the information in this book needs to get out.
Yeah, I love that you use the word hope. That's
Yeah.
kind of the theme going through this documentary now when I'm talking to people, because for the documentary, we're talking to people that are trying to overcome obesity, overcome type 2 diabetes, women's health issues. But the core like thread amongst most of them is a lot of them have depression, mental health
Yeah.
issues. And I've heard that word so many times. I didn't have hope. I was out of hope. I was hopeless.
Yeah.
And you hear that sometimes. Me in particular, I'm probably cynical because I've got 4 girls and there's a lot of dramatics.
Right.
Everything's dramatic. Oh, I'm hopeless. But I don't know a good way to describe depression to people that haven't experienced it before. It's really hard to do. You say the word hopeless and you sound like you're being dramatic, but for me it was literally hopeless. It was like, this
Oh
is it.
yeah.
It's never going to get better. This is just the way it is forever. I've tried everything and nothing is going to work,
Well,
sort of thing.
right. And I mean, and you're hopeless if people actually feel encouraged at the thought of ending things.
Yeah.
That that's hopeless
Yeah.
because they don't see any light at the end of the tunnel. There's nothing in this life that is giving them the feeling that they can get through what they're going through. And so, I mean, that's to me the ultimate in hopelessness.
Absolutely. Yeah. And man, I've been there. I have been there. It was
Yeah.
For me, it was so bad at one point where for me it's like, oh, you have kids. How could you end your life when you have kids? Not to go too dark with people, but just to explain, because this is one of the
Yeah.
frustrating things for me is I've got friends and family and I've seen this, and I my own self when you're depressed, where people just be like, just go walk it off. If you guys take nothing else away from this, don't ever say that to someone. I
Yeah.
think people just don't understand, but
Yeah.
you're so depressed and you're so dark. It's not that you need to go
Yeah.
get exercise or sunshine. I was in such a dark place for a long time where I was like, man, that'd be horrible for my kids if I just ended it. But then I was like,
Yeah.
no, actually, it would be a relief because they wouldn't have to be around such a miserable, sad,
Well,
hopeless person for
it's a
years and
catch
years.
22. I had a good friend years ago who had it was probably a good 20 years after her father ended it all. And she ended up an alcoholic. She was like, "Why wasn't I enough?"
Mm.
And I f I hope that anybody who's in this situation, who had a parent who passed that way will realize that it's that much of a pit of hopelessness that it's really not a reflection of you
Mm.
that your parent did this.
Right.
It's just that the state that they were in was so deep and dark that they couldn't even see you.
Mm.
And I bet you if they could, things would have been different, but they just can't. It's like complete blindness,
Right.
you know?
It's like you're looking through a completely different lens at everything. And
Yeah.
so until you start eating the proper foods, take
Right.
that lens off, you can start seeing clearly for the first time.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
yeah, not to go too dark with it, but the only other thing I wanted to mention was the thing that really fires me up for the documentary and everything going forward. Uh, as if I wasn't fired up enough for all of the other reasons, but it's just this next generation of kids. Some of the
Mhm.
stats that Dr. Eid shared with me, college students with depression, I think it was like 40%. Uh,
That's insane.
she said right now there's 1 billion people with mental health issues in the world. And she and I believe that number is probably drastically underreported, because I know with my
Probably.
depression and anxiety, I went years and years and years before I went in and got help. And it's stigmatized. Like for men in particular, it's like, oh, tough it up. You know, you don't talk about those
Right,
things.
right. Very often men will not seek help.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I never did for years and years until it got so bad that I was completely desperate. And thankfully, my wife took me in to see someone.
Yeah.
But sadly, then I went in and they gave me medication. They didn't talk about nutrition, and
Right.
they said it's going to take 3 months, Carrie, before we know if these pills work for you or not. And of course, after 3 months, they didn't. Three more
Right.
months, 3 more months,
It's a
and
big guessing game.
yeah,
And I know I had actually the first page I had open. I know we'll do an overview of the book, but because you're led into this, the first page I had open that I had underlined was on page 17. She mentioned the brain has a separate circulatory system.
mm,
So we can't evaluate its biochemistry by drawing blood from your arm and simply running laboratory tests.
oh,
So she said these obstacles to understanding the inner workings of the brain leave us with little choice but to resort to guesswork when making medication recommendations.
right,
And it's like that makes so much sense as to why it's like they throw the most common thing at you, but they don't know if it's going to work.
right.
There's really no way of evaluating what really is going on in your brain. I thought that was really interesting that she brought that point up.
Yeah, so interesting. Yeah, just in my own experience, they had no idea. That was my problem with medication throughout my whole life too. Is it was just like these are the doctors. They know what they're doing. They went to school for 8 years, 10 years, whatever. I have no idea. I'm just going to listen to them. But in this case, per your example and just my own experience, and it just
Oh,
makes
mine
sense.
too.
Yeah,
I
they
was on
don't know.
all sorts of stuff.
Yeah, try this. I did it 3 months, did nothing. They're like, we'll just up the dosage. 3 more months, 3 more months. And
Mhm.
when you're suicidally and hopelessly depressed, and then you're told, oh, maybe in 3 months it'll get a little bit better. It's one of the
Well,
worst things
the
in the world.
funny thing is, which is kind of the irony of it all, is that they'll tell you to give the medication time and that it could take, give it a whole month before you evaluate whether or not it's going to work. But yet people that go on to a ketogenic diet, it works like in a week,
Right.
sometimes even quicker than that,
Yeah.
which tells me that when you give your brain the right thing, it's not going to take that long for it to work.
Right. Yeah. That's a very good point. That for me, and like I used the Todd Bachnis example before, how quickly things change for him just putting the right fuel in. It's
Yeah. I
I
mean,
did
just
a
like it does for the rest of our bodies, why wouldn't it do the same thing for your brain?
right. I have completely changed my view on so many things. I did a video with Aaron from the Kilby Life a couple weeks ago, and he said something like he just finally realized that nobody has anything figured out. Like we go through our whole life and we're always like, yeah, this they know what they're talking about. They know what they're talking about. He's like, pretty much nobody has anything figured out, and I'm really
That is true.
yeah, I'm starting to believe it more and more, and especially with like I don't want to rag on doctors because I believe most doctors mean well, but I've
Yes,
had
they
just
do.
I've had just too many bad experiences. But most of them don't know, even for non mental health issues. Some of
Yeah,
it's just well, maybe this pill will work. We'll try it, but in so many cases, the pill isn't the answer because the root cause of the problem was the nutrition, and the
right.
doctors never talk about the nutrition. They never mention it.
Well, and they don't know. I mean,
Right.
they really don't know. To me, this book is just kind of groundbreaking information. And, I mean, I never learned anything. I mean, I did learn a little bit about nutrition when I went to nursing school. And of course, we learned therapeutic diets for people who are acutely ill. But I don't ever recall there being any information about mental health in nutrition at all.
Right.
And yeah. And so, and it was interesting because working in gastroenterology, there was always a lot of talk when it comes to people with irritable bowel syndrome about the mind and the mind gut connection.
Yeah.
And when I was reading the section in the book about IBS, it was really interesting because we used to, whenever we would coach our patients on how to treat their IBS, they would go on a low FODMAP diet, which is the fermentable, molecules in food. They go on a low FODMAP diet, but then it was usually a two-pronged approach. It was address the mental health issue
Hmm.
and then get the FODMAPs out of your diet. But when I was reading her section, she was talking, so it was more like, if you can start with the brain, it'll help your gut. But what she was saying is if you can fix your gut, it'll help your brain. It's like we were looking at it from the head down, and she's looking at it from the gut up.
Right.
And that was a big light bulb for me. It's like, oh my gosh, I wish like if I could go back and I talk to all those patients, I would have so much more to tell them about what they can do to fix their IBS. And it was because it comes with some mental health issues.
Right. That's
Yeah.
so interesting because I was diagnosed with IBS, put on the low FODMAP diet, had acid reflux, silent GERD, acid reflux, all those things. At the same time, mental health issues. And they're all gone now on the proper human diet. You know, it's kind of scary for some of these other things, not to get too off topic here, but like I've been going down the rabbit hole with the Ozempic stuff lately.
Oh yeah.
And what that does to the gut and the stomach. And you lose weight, but you continue to eat the poor foods that you were eating that caused you to gain the
Right.
weight in the first place. And then there's these studies that are coming out now that probably speaking to what you just mentioned, that a lot of people that are going on this medication that's supposed to affect the stomach, they're having mental health issues and depression and things like that.
Yeah.
It's all tied together.
It causes gastroparesis basically, which is incredibly miserable. So
Is it?
that's where it's a delayed emptying with the stomach.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So I mean the whole gut is full of nerves, and the vagus nerve controls the gut. And so, the only way your stomach empties itself of food is by contractions. It contracts and it pushes the food through. And so if you don't have that natural contraction, it slows that down. The food just sits there.
Mm,
And people feel nauseated. It's like having a stomach flu constantly.
right.
And some people get it really bad, and other people kind of just have a low grade mild nausea all the time, but it's miserable.
And then you're supposed to take, sorry, I'm getting off track here, but we could do a whole other video on that. But I've been learning more about it. It's just blown my mind. When you're prescribed that medication, it's supposed to be a lifelong thing. And I was just listening to someone talk about it. They're like, well, what happens when that person reaches like a plateau or homeostasis? Because it always seems to happen with something. They don't stop taking the medication. Then the people that would stop taking the medication, the makers of the medication were even saying, oh, you're going to gain all the weight back and then some.
It stops working. Yeah, because you're not solving any of the problems. It's just a Band-Aid.
Yeah.
So, all right. Do you want to dig in here and kind of start?
Yeah. Should we start with the first part? So the book is kind of cool how there's obviously chapters, but there's 4 parts. And the first part is called Rethinking Brain Food.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes. That part is a little more sciencey, which of course I love. But yeah, so she has 5 chapters on, what causes mental health, why the nutrition guidelines are wrong. She talks about the supposedly science behind all the nutrition guidelines.
Right.
And I like the fact that she spends some time talking about clinical trials and studies and what actually is evidence. I'm going to show this one slide. So I just copied this so you can see kind of words behind it, but I just took a screenshot. But she talked about the hierarchy of evidence. And I think it's super important for everyone to really understand that when you're looking at, she brought up like news articles or news reports about, this particular, they found out that berries are going to be, have so many antioxidants, they're going to keep you from having these particular health problems. She said most of the nutrition science is only at the second level, which is the epidemiological or observational studies, which is not really science. The non-randomized controlled trials are where the volunteers know what they're getting, what they're being tested for, and they know like whether they're getting a placebo or they're getting the control. There's too much opportunity for a placebo effect. Randomized controlled trials are when nobody knows, even the researchers don't know who's getting what. So say, but meta-analysis is the best. It takes like every randomized controlled trial on a topic and puts it all together. And so if you see that there's a meta-analysis of randomized controlled trials, then you're going to have probably much better evidence. But when it comes to nutrition, it's going to be mostly these epidemiological studies. And then she gave this example, which you can't really see this very well, but there was the berry example.
Yeah.
So it was I was like blown away with the study they did. So they determined about berries in women, that berries are good for women's health. And it was this long-term like study over like 20 years, 16,000 women. But they 5 times during this 20-year period, they gave the women this questionnaire. And this bottom one is just kind of a continuation. But basically, they asked them to fill it out and ask them, over the last year, how many of these different fruits did you eat?
It's so
And
foolish. It's
it's
so foolish.
ridiculous. Like, who can remember that? And they even said, like for seasonal fruit in the instructions, for example, if food such as cantaloupe is eaten 4 times a week during the approximate 3 months that it's in season, then average it across the year. So they
Right.
had to go in there and do math. And everything's based on their memory. And this is what this study, and then based on that study, there's all these news reports.
Right.
And so, yeah,
Crazy headlines.
that say eat berries. They've figured out that berries are the key to everything, when it was like literally not at all, because this is the actual type of data that they're collecting.
It's insane. So this is that screenshot you had, that's like a food frequency questionnaire, I think they call it.
Yes.
And they use that in all these studies. There were some recent ones that came out as well. And it was like we were saying before, nobody knows what they're doing or has anything figured out. Because you and I, Lynn, and anyone watching this can look at that and see how foolish that is. I can't even remember. I only eat meat and steak. I couldn't even tell you what I ate yesterday for steak, let alone how many blueberries I ate weeks ago or whatever.
Right. And they sent that out. I mean, it was like over the past year, but she said it was like over a 20-year period, they only sent it out 5 times.
That's insane.
Yeah.
I just want to add one thing. So Lynn mentioned the science and the studies. That's what I love too. Like, I'm at the back of the book, and this whole back are all the sources and the studies. And this whole first couple pages is just for chapter 1 by itself. And
Right.
I just want to say one thing real quick, because Lynn, you know way more about this being a nurse than I do. I'm learning as I go, but the observational study that you mentioned, so many of these nutritional studies are observational. And I
Right.
saw this example once before and I love it. So I'm just going to talk about this real quick. One of the things that's demonized meat, I think, was one of these food frequency questionnaires that said, how many times do you eat meat? Well, if you really think about it, what do most Americans on the standard American diet eat for meat? Ba-da-ba-ba-ba, it's McDonald's, right? Now, take a McDonald's meal.
Or lunch meat.
Yeah, or lunch meat. But if you were to take a McDonald's meal and you look at, there's a little tiny puck of a burger on there, and then you have the carby processed bun, you have a pound of French fries, you have a gallon of Coke, they eat an ice cream with it afterwards, there's seed oil ketchup all over the top of it. All of that stuff gets a complete pass at these observational studies, and they're like, oh, it was the meat, that little tiny puck of meat that caused it. It's just insane.
Right, exactly. They have, and that's why these nutritional studies are so challenging, because they can't just feed one person meat. I mean, they need to do them on carnivores. They need to have carnivores be the ones doing it, because we just eat meat, and then they can compare us.
Too many variables, yeah.
Too many variables. So, yeah, it's crazy.
But and the thing with the studies that drives me insane too is when you dig into so many of those studies, there's usually bias. Like, who's paying for these? They're very expensive. And you'll look at these ones that demonize meat, and oftentimes, oh, you get down to the root of it, it was sponsored by Kellogg's or a cereal company or something.
Right. Well, I like the fact that she basically said that the way things are done now with mental health is that you're looking from the outside in. They're looking to see all of the external things that impact your mental health, and then they're guessing about medication as far as what the brain needs and what the brain will respond to. Her approach was, let's start with the brain and let's determine what nutrients does the brain need to function properly and go from there. She did the complete opposite of what the field of psychiatry does.
Yeah.
And what she came up with was fascinating. I mean, I was really chapter 5 on the brain metabolism. I just found it to be really fascinating, especially like she's talking about how glucose in the brain and insulin in the blood, there's an inverse relationship with regard to insulin and glucose. So like in the rest of your body, when your glucose levels go up, your insulin levels go up. But in the brain, it's the inverse relationship. So your insulin, you don't have enough insulin in the brain to process glucose when the glucose goes up too high. Was that kind of your understanding too of what she was saying?
Yeah.
So you've got this glucose hanging out. So you're basically developing insulin resistance in your brain. And that was really fascinating for me too, because it's like, okay, we can develop insulin resistance in our own in our bodies, but our bodies can actually generate the insulin. It seems like it would take a little bit longer to develop insulin resistance, but it sounds like there's like less availability of insulin to process that glucose in the brain. And she said that high blood glucose is toxic. It will damage every cell in the body. And so it's basically, and it creates oxidative, like free radicals, which damages your body and damages your brain. But whereas ketones, like your brain will choose ketones, even if it has glucose and ketones together, it will choose, it prefers the ketones,
Right.
in order to function. And I'm going to pull up another slide. I know this is the sciencey part.
Yeah, this was definitely the sciencey part.
But I wanted to at least show this because so the mitochondria is the shaded part of this diagram. And so the mitochondria is in your cells. And so she talked about these two engines that we have because it has to do with creating energy for our cells to function. The energy G is the glucose energy. And there's like 10. Now she mentioned 10 steps, but another in the book, she mentioned 13 steps to convert glucose into, so there's 10 steps to convert it to pyruvate. And then there's 3 more steps to get it into acetyl-CoA, where it can actually get into the mitochondria and get into the cycle. She said that there's people that have mental health issues where there's a problem with one of those steps in the process. And they cannot properly process the glucose into the form that it needs to get into the mitochondria, to get into this cycle, to generate energy, to fuel your cells. I thought that was fascinating, that there's actually a dysfunction of the process so that they cannot utilize the glucose properly. Whereas if you go into a ketogenic state, this ketone, there's 3 steps to it'll completely bypass the glucose portion of this and skip right through, get the ketones processed. There's also, I think she said, was it autism, that there's a problem with the electron transport chain. I know this is a lot, but this is the electron transport chain I pulled in. She said this number 1, this little unit right here with autism, that's dysfunctional. And it can't, because this electron transport chain pulls all the electrons from that cycle and funnels them through in order to create fuel. But with autism, it doesn't work. So, but the ketones can bypass that and still function and create energy. So, I mean, it's complicated, but my goodness, it was like fascinating. So like you guys if you're interested in the sciencey part, you got to get the book and you read it, because she breaks down like, so, okay, for this condition, for like schizophrenia, this is the pathway that's dysfunctional and you can bypass it by getting into nutritional ketosis.
Right. And she breaks it down and makes it, I was gonna say she breaks it down and makes it easier to understand for some parts of it too. You kind of covered it, but like she said, it takes 13 chemical reactions to turn glucose into COA, ketones are more efficient energy sources than glucose because it only takes 3. That's exactly what you said. But she breaks it
Yeah.
down and then she says, well, why is this important? And she gets into, it goes from the really hard science that some of it's over my head, then it kind of breaks it down, and then it gets into the reason
Yeah.
why.
But I've never heard of people having an actual dysfunction in that initial stage of processing the glucose down to get it into the cell.
Right.
And it makes, yeah, I mean, and so it would make that to me, that makes sense as to why people do better on a ketogenic diet,
Yeah.
because it completely bypasses the glucose part of that process.
Right. It's like it seems much more efficient.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's one of the things I kept hearing too, is like both the brain and the heart function much more efficiently on ketones.
Yeah.
I never really
Yeah,
understood
and
the brain part why, but now it's making more sense.
yeah, and if the the steps for glucose are dysfunctional for you, say you've got depression or you've got like bipolar disorder, and you keep feeding yourself the glucose and having your body run off of the glucose, you're continually trying to feed a cycle where it's broken. So you're not going to get healed because you're just feeding it the wrong fuel. It can't process that fuel.
Right.
So it's important to get away from fueling your brain with glucose and get over to fueling it with ketones.
Absolutely. So that's kind of the first section of the book. And then the second section gets into more of the dietary madness, like what's going on with our modern diets, processed foods, high sugar intake.
Mhm.
And it really digs into that a little bit more. She gets into some real specifics too, like what's processed food versus what is ultra processed food. And then to your point earlier, I just love all of the stats and science she has in here. It's all referenced in the back of the book. But for example, she's saying ultra processed foods make up 40% of what Australians choose to consume, 50% for the UK, 60% of what Americans buy at the grocery store are not processed, but ultra processed foods.
Right.
Twinkies and Doritos and
Yeah.
Hidden Valley Ranch dressing.
And even the health food most of it is still very processed. They talk about whole grains, but yet it gets basically pulverized. And she said that in order to be considered a whole grain, it just has to have all the components in the right proportions, but they can pulverize it to the point where it gets absorbed in your system, still turns into, creates a big spike in insulin.
Right.
And it's, maybe a tad better than the more refined, like a white flour versus a whole wheat flour. It's maybe a little bit better than the white flour, but it doesn't mean that it's good for you.
Right.
It still creates a big spike. And all these powders that a lot of people will eat, or the bars that are full of all this, sticky stuff to keep it all together. It's all still processed food.
Yeah. And they're so tricky. They're so tricky with so much of it. Like, I don't know. You get Cheerios and you're like, oh, it's got all these vitamins in it. Well, they pulverize the oats and then they process the oats so that they become shelf stable, and all of those nutrients and vitamins are gone. Then they fortify it. They put these kind of fake nutrients back in it that a lot of them don't even absorb back into your body. But you walk by and you read the box, you're like, oh, Cheerios, heart healthy with
Yeah.
vitamins. These are good for me.
Did you know that that red check, the heart healthy check on all the products? Did you know that the manufacturers buy the right to put that on there?
It blows my mind. I did hear that recently, and it's just insane.
Yeah, it has nothing. They get a volume discount if they buy a certain number of red checks. Then they get a volume discount on how much they pay for the rights to use them, and so they can put them on as many products as they want. Yeah.
It's just crazy. I could do a whole episode on cereal and how insane it is that we're getting kids hooked on cereal from a young age. When we interviewed Dr. Barry for the documentary, that was one of the more remarkable things he said. He's like, every single time you eat a bowl of cereal, you're eating glyphosate. It's like, wow.
Right.
Amongst everything else that's in there that's processed with all the sugar and everything too. Well, even
Yeah.
just like Cheerios, you look at Cheerios and people think they're healthy, but the first ingredients is oats which is what, like a starch that breaks down.
Yeah.
It's a carb. It breaks down into sugar. And then the second one is,
And it's pulverized. It's ground down. It's
right.
not a whole oat.
Yeah. It's like the first three ingredients in Cheerios are carbs, sugar, sugar. It all breaks down into sugar in your system.
Right, right, right.
So yeah, the whole second section, our descent into dietary madness, gets a little bit out of the science, but more into like, how did we get here? Why are things so crazy?
Yeah.
The book examines the link between dietary trends and the rise in mental health disorders. And basically what this whole section is proposing is there's sort of a link between what we're eating and the rise in these mental health disorders. If you look at them kind of on a chart, it correlates. It's like this kind of makes sense why everyone's having more and more mental health issues. I mean, we touched on the mental health stuff before, but the fact that not just the fact that the numbers are so great right now, but they keep going up. They just keep increasing. And it seems like they're increasing at the same rate that we're eating more of these ultra processed foods and sugars and seed oils.
Well, and she talks too about Alzheimer's. It's not just about, depression, anxiety, bipolar disorder. She talks about Alzheimer's as well. And of course, now they're starting to call Alzheimer's type 3 diabetes, but it all starts with insulin resistance. And, it just amazes me, all of these different diseases that we have, it just seems to all go back to insulin resistance as the root cause.
Right. That she gets into metabolic health in here before, and that's been my biggest learning experience doing this documentary. And I'm so fortunate to talk to all of these different experts. Like I talked to Dr. Philip Ovadia, the heart surgeon. His biggest thing was metabolic health. I talked to Dr. Tony Hampton about diabetes, metabolic health. I talked to Professor Seyfried about cancer, metabolic health.
Metabolic health, right.
Over and over and over again. That was really eye-opening for me because each of them were so passionate about their individual specialty. But then for me, looking at the outside, I'm like, this is all just connected. If I'm improving my metabolic health because I have type 2 diabetes, I'm going to fix all of these other things, reduce my odds of getting cancer, reduce my odds of getting dementia or Alzheimer's or all these other downstream things. It's all just connected.
Right.
In other words, for anyone watching this, you should be concerned about your metabolic health. That's one of my big takeaways. Everyone in the world seems to me that are like, oh, you're doing carnivore. What about your cholesterol? Why are you worried about cholesterol? You're 6 times more likely to suffer from heart disease if you have poor metabolic health than if your cholesterol numbers are
and
off.
I like what she says, and I forget where she says it, but I underlined it. She says, it doesn't make any sense whatsoever that one organ of your body requires a different diet than the rest.
Yes.
Your brain, all of your organs, your skin, every part of your body, your hormones benefit from being in nutritional ketosis. Healing takes place for everything. Why would the heart be the exception?
The brain, yeah.
And she was talking about cholesterol at this time.
Right.
Yeah, obviously the brain's not an exception either, but she was talking about cholesterol when she was talking about this because that's kind of one of those things. I think it was in the meat section. People talk about, but what about your cholesterol?
Right.
So she was actually saying like, why would your heart, and in this case too, the brain, why would it need a separate diet?
I love that. That sounds like a Dr. Berry video right there because you listen to it, you're like, it's just common sense. Of course, it makes sense.
Right. I mean, that makes no sense that you had to have one organ that needs a different diet, or even if you have 2 organs, the brain and the heart. Oh, the brain and your heart need separate diets than the rest of your body. We'd all be dead.
Yep.
Your body needs one diet, the same diet for every single part of your body.
Yep. And if we simplify it, it's just eating natural foods that we're intended to eat and not putting this unnatural, crazy stuff into our bodies.
Yeah.
One of the big questions I had for Dr. Eid was, I told her, I was like, I had depression, anxiety, all those things, but I also had really bad brain fog for years. And I didn't realize how bad it was until I was out of the fog and I could see more clearly. I said, like, what is that from? And she covers it in this section a little bit. She said, increased inflammation and oxidative stress caused by refined carbohydrates and vegetable oils can contribute to psychiatric problems by throwing your neurotransmitters out of balance. I again, it's almost a Dr. Berry thing. Well, that makes sense. My whole body was inflamed from these crazy foods I was eating. My
Oh,
brain
yeah.
was getting inflamed as well, and you end up with brain fog and having
Yeah.
trouble finding your words and things like that.
She even talks about, in all her sciencey portion of it, she even talks about the mechanics of how oxidative stress occurs, as far as it has to do with, you know, electrons that escape the cycle and don't get turned into ATP, and your body responds when it creates, and too much of it creates this oxidative stress. I mean, she goes to the very fine details of how is this happening in your body, and she talks to you about what nutrients your body needs to get properly through each stage of this process to fuel your brain. But a couple of things she mentioned too that were really interesting to me. She said that your body produces its own antioxidants. I didn't know that. She said your body sees phytonutrients as a foreign invader,
Mm,
which was interesting because when you talk about, you hear about vegetarianism or just eating vegetables, the whole talk is, well, that's full of phytonutrients and those are good for you. But she said, no, your body sees nutrients as good, but sees phytonutrients as foreign and wants to mount an immune defense against them. So it makes sense that when you're eating a very plant-based diet that you're going to be inflamed
right.
because your body's fighting what you're trying to to fuel it with, and your body's fighting it, sees it as foreign and wants to fight it off.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I had a little bookmark here on page 144 where she asks, the section is, how does the ketogenic diet improve brain health? And she has a whole list of things. I thought it might be helpful to kind of go through this list just to
Oh,
read it
yeah.
off for people, because this is the big question, right? How does the going into nutritional ketosis improve your brain? So it cools inflammation, it bolsters antioxidant defenses, it partially bypasses defects in the damaged mitochondria. And that's what I was talking about, the defects in, processing, glucose. It repairs and replenishes your mitochondria. It supports neuroplasticity, which is the creation of new brain circuitry. So your brain can work around issues and create new circuitry. It resolves sensory gating deficits that cause hallucinations. She does talk about schizophrenia and hallucinations and these gating deficits. So read about it. I'm not going to talk about it, but it rebalances your glutamate, your GABA, and other neurotransmitter systems, which is so important for mental health. It stabilizes your brain cell networks. It lowers sodium levels inside the neurons, making them less reactive. High sodium levels inside neurons make them very excitable.
Hmm.
And so it's really important to have the right gradient between with the sodium. And so the ketogenic diet will do that. And it bridges the brain glucose energy gap. So those are all these things that it does for your brain. I thought that was a really good list.
I love that. And what she said just before that list was, unlike medications, which may just target one or maybe two of the few brain chemistry problems at most, the ketogenic diet is a multi-purpose tool covering all of those things Lynn just mentioned, which makes sense.
Right.
When they put me on medication, they put you on medication. It's like, okay, that might tackle one or two of these things, but you just listed like 10 things that just
Yeah.
eating the proper human
And the
diet helps with.
and the medications tend to be focused just on a neurotransmitter. Like SSRIs, the whole point of what they do is they just keep the neurotransmitters in the gap longer, the serotonin. But what if that's not your big, that's maybe one component of the issue, or maybe that's not even your issue. Maybe your issue is your brain can't process your the glucose, and your brain is just not functioning properly. You got to get to the source of it.
Right.
She gets to the source on more of a mitochondrial level.
Right. The thing I love with this book too is, as carnivores eating the proper human diet or even ketogenic, we get so many arguments from people, and sometimes they're hard to, I don't know what's the answer. So even in this section, after the one that Lynn just mentioned, she gets into, is a ketogenic diet safe? And then
Yeah.
she specifically lists 3 different criticisms. So I'm not going to read all those. You guys are going to have to get the book to read some of these, but it's really good. Like, very specific arguments against it, and then the reason why she's kind of debunking some of those.
Right. Right. And I like the fact that she does do some discussion of the various different mental health issues, like the bipolar and the depression and the schizophrenia and all the different issues. And she talks specifically, and she gives a lot of different examples of people who went on the ketogenic diet, went into nutritional ketosis, and the unbelievable results that they saw. I mean, there were some people with very, very severe mental illness, and I love her stories
Mm-hmm.
of these people and how desperate and hopeless they were and how quickly they saw results. It was
Yeah.
just incredible.
Really inspiring. And I like how she gets into it too, the science of each of them. For example, I think she says there are certain psychiatric disorders that maybe do a little bit better with medication and others that don't. And she gets into the reasons why. One thing that she mentions kind of near the end of this chapter that I found very interesting was substance use disorders, like addictions and things like that.
Right.
She talks about that, and it's just interesting, and it's completely anecdotal, but I've talked to so many carnivores on my channel. Back to Todd Bachman's, he was one of them that he's like, I don't have any addictions anymore. I was addicted to chewing tobacco forever. That went away. I was addicted to diet soda forever. And I really feel like I have no addictions anymore. That was going to be another question I asked her afterwards, but she touches on that a little bit here, I guess, in terms of substance use disorders. And let me see what she says. They did a test on strict classic ketogenic diet, experienced fewer alcohol cravings, and required about 50% less the medication they were commonly prescribed. Yeah, so there's something going on there too. With I feel like the standard American diet perpetuates addiction in some way. I don't know what I'm talking about. She touches on it a little bit here, but that's just sort of anecdotal from what I've heard and talked to other people. But she touches on it just very briefly on that part. So
yeah, and she does talk a little bit about depression, and whereas some of these disorders are the glucose issue, the pathway issue. She said depression, with major depression, she said that one of the ways that the ketogenic diets can help with depression is by cooling down inflammation. So it sounds like with depression specifically, it's very much an inflammatory condition.
right.
So it makes sense that if you can get your inflammation down, it says that with the going into ketosis switches the brain's immune surveillance cells from being pro-inflammatory to anti-inflammatory.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And we're going to the doctor, and they're not giving us medicine that gets rid of the inflammation or depression. It does something completely else. So
Nothing. And she
right.
said that the first report describing the use of a ketogenic diet to treat mental illness was actually published in 1965. But yet you never heard of it.
Nope.
No one ever told me about it.
I was going to say, I don't have my book here. Oh, I have it over there. I have this book called Sugar Blues. It talks about all the horrible side effects of sugar, including inflammation and all those other things. And then you look at the book, and it was written in like 1972. It's like we've been knowing this stuff for so long.
We've lost knowledge.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, even on the ketogenic stuff where she's talking about, is it safe? And then you're like, they've been using ketogenic diet to treat health issues forever. Epilepsy and seizures and things like that.
Right. If it wasn't safe, the human race wouldn't exist still.
Right.
Because this is pretty much how people ate.
Right. And we're born into it.
But she talks about even substance abuse. So, I mean, for whatever the mental health issue is, whatever is, she seems like she tackles it in this book.
Yeah. This next section, this was my favorite section by far. So we're at chapter 10. Meat, the original superfood, and the first 5 words are meat is good for you.
Yes.
You could just close it and move on to the next chapter.
Right.
Except she says, yeah, mic drop. She actually says in here, though, in a perfect world, this would be all anyone needs to know about meat. But given the widespread efforts to blame meat for everything from constipation to cardiovascular disease to cancer, it's not enough to explain the biological benefits of meat and let the information speak for itself. So she has to get into kind of debunking a lot of misinformation we've been told about red meat and how horrible it is for us over and over again. And she gets into the science a little bit in this part, macronutrients, micronutrients, gets into all the different vitamins and stuff that you can get in meat versus plant foods. And there's like tables in here. It just explains it really well.
there's a lot of tables. I really appreciate that. And she has like all of the different micronutrients, even like with amino acids, with the breakdown of the protein. She lists all of the amino acids in a chart of which are essential and you know where you get them from, along with also all the vitamins. She has a chart of every vitamin and where the source of where you can get it.
Yeah.
So
So
very,
good.
very thorough.
And then a little bit later in this chapter, I'm on 179 now. This is like the carnivore handbook. If you're starting out on carnivore and you're going to go to a family reunion or birthday party, and your well-meaning aunt or mother or grandmother is going to say, well, what about meat causing kidney disease? Or what about meat causing diabetes or gout or inflammation? She
Or
literally has
yeah,
like every one of these in
all the
bold. Yes,
myths about meat.
every myth about meat. It's
And
so good.
even the myth about charred meats cause cancer.
Yep.
You know, the myth meat causes constipation, meat causes hypertension. Yeah, she addresses all of these myths about meat.
And the cool thing is, most of them too are referenced to the back of the book, where you have the
Yes.
actual source. So
Yeah, even she addresses the question, well, doesn't meat cause gout? She addresses that as well.
I love that one. I
Yeah.
overcame gout with the proper human diet, but I was told before that the meat was causing it.
Yeah. Now she does kind of warn a little bit about the eggs and the dairy, because there are some can be issues with reactivity with both of those. Now I know for myself, I had to remove eggs from my diet for a while because of my mast cell disease and my histamine issues. Because the egg whites are high in histamine, the egg yolks are low histamine, but some people do have issues. And if you have issues with eggs, and it might be the whites, but they're very nutritious.
Right.
So she has a whole chapter where she talks about eggs, but it is one of the higher allergen foods. So some people cannot tolerate the eggs.
Yeah. I know this is all anecdotal, but I've been doing Lion Diet for 15 days now, no eggs. And
Okay.
I feel way better. I feel like I'm doing better with, and that's really I guess I had a little bit of bacon before too, probably a
Yeah.
lot of bacon, but feel,
Oh,
yeah.
yeah. Well, I had to laugh. So page 188, she's talking about the crazy headlines that we see. And of course, these are all based on these really poor nutritional studies that don't really tell you anything. I
Yeah.
love the examples she gives of these headlines. So 2018, the headline was, "An egg a day may reduce heart disease, study finds."
Hmm.
The year later, 2019, headline, "Eggs raise the risk for heart disease and death."
Right.
A year later, in 2020, moderate egg consumption gets the green light again. And then in 2021, just eating just half an egg with yolk a day increases death risk by 7%. This is like ping pong.
Yo-yo diet. Yeah.
It's like so basically they can't figure out what they want to report about eggs.
Right. Well, isn't it that way with everything, Lynn? I'm
It
thinking
is.
back to just watching the morning news. Oh, coffee's great for you. It's going to kill you. It's just like everything is back and forth to
Yeah.
the point where you don't even need this book where you're just like, I'm pretty sure they don't know what they're talking about. They just
They
keep
don't,
something.
because they may have isolated one little nutrient from some particular food, tested on rats, and the rat had a particular effect from it, and they have drawn conclusions for the whole human race. Because, well, we had this one nutrient, the rats got sick, so therefore any food containing that nutrient is going to kill you, which is ridiculous. And first of all, the food you eat is whole. You don't eat one nutrient, and we're not rats.
Right.
But that's basically, so, whenever you see things on TV and on the news about nutrition, I would just definitely put it under a lot of scrutiny.
Right.
There's probably not any science behind it. So, and even if they say, they say, let's see, the actual study may be kind of vague and may say that, there may be a link, but yet the news will say we've discovered a link.
Yeah. Yeah. It's always exaggerated by the news.
Always exaggerated. Yeah. Yeah. But she said eggs are among the safest, most nutritious foods you can eat. And she does cover cholesterol in that chapter as well.
Right.
Which is, just like Dr. Ovadia, it's not something to be afraid of. We need our cholesterol, especially for, the brain needs the cholesterol.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Then the next section she gets into, well, it's basically the seed sections, but it's titled grains, beans, nuts, and seeds. And then she goes on to say, even though we only use the word seed for one branch of this family, deep down, all of these foods are seeds. Grains are seeds, beans are seeds, nuts are seeds, and of course, seeds are seeds. She gets into the birth of agriculture and macronutrients. There's some really good tables in here as well.
Yeah, and she does talk specifically about the antinutrients of all of these. And some of them can be cooked out, some of them can be soaked out. But she brought up a bunch of them that I wasn't familiar with. Hadn't heard of raffinose. That was a new one for me. But yeah, she goes into, if you want to know, like, of the different grains or seeds, what anti-nutrients are in those particular foods. She goes into a lot of detail, but the raffinose family of indigestible sugars is the single greatest cause of flatulence in the human diet. I did not know that.
Yeah, neither did I. That's interesting. Yeah, kind of near the end of the seeds, foods in a nutshell, tips for nourishing, protecting, and energizing your brain. She says, I encourage everyone to completely avoid all grains and legumes as their health risks far outweigh their benefits. Grains and beans are also high in carbohydrates, so they're potentially unsafe. Nuts and seeds are problematic as well, so I encourage you to explore how those foods will affect you. Then the next section is all on fruits and vegetables.
Right. And she's not necessarily just like a carte blanche to avoid them all. Now, one of the things with her approach is that she has, and this is the next section, obviously, but she goes into the steps and this different facets of what she's recommending for people to do. Now, you and I are on the more extreme end because we're carnivore and more lion diet, but she doesn't necessarily think that everybody needs to be there. But so she does talk about fruits and about vegetables, and she talks about fiber. It was interesting when she was talking about fiber. Everybody talks about how, of course, you need fiber. Fiber makes the gut bacteria make butyrate, but she said that the butyrate is actually, fiber is not the only thing that makes the gut bacteria that produces butyrate in the gut. And yeah. So I know I always, like, I had a GI map test done. It's this really comprehensive stool test. And my naturopathic doctor was kind of concerned because of some of the microbiome, some of the bacteria were really, really low. And these are the bacteria that help fight inflammation. And I just kind of said, well, maybe I don't need them as much because my gut's not as inflamed. Like, when you look at the gut microbiome, the norms are probably based on people that are on the standard American diet. So maybe you need more of these bacteria that help to fight inflammation when you're eating an inflammatory diet.
Right.
So all of these things that are put out there as reasons why you need vegetables, reasons why you need fiber, maybe it's only if you're on the standard American diet.
Yeah. It's almost like we need a whole separate carnivore standard American diet. It's like our chemistry is different. Everything's different.
Yeah.
It's always being judged based on the standard American diet, which is not necessarily correct.
So she does talk about the fruits and the vegetables of biggest concern that have the greatest amount of toxins in them to avoid, the neurotoxins. So those are, if you definitely read through that section, because it will tell you exactly what to avoid. If you are someone who still wants to incorporate fruits and vegetables, she goes into a lot of detail about what to avoid.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then speaking of a lot of detail, sort of the the last section, part 4, I love the title, Hope is on the Menu. Getting into detail, she basically outlines strategies. Like, this is like Lynn said, it's not just, oh, eat carnivore like we are. There's different strategies. So she has this quiet diet approach. And I'm trying to find where it was. I think there's actually like a chart in here where it's kind of like a flow chart. Like, yeah, here we go. The quiet diet
Yes.
roadmap starts with quiet paleo. And then if you're feeling better, you go this way. If you're not feeling better, you move on to quiet keto. And it kind of just takes you through.
Yeah. And she tells you how much time to spend on each one. So if you've never been on any sort of a diet that's to, approaching your mental health issues with diet, she gives you a very detailed roadmap of, okay, start with the paleo, which paleo will not get you into nutritional ketosis. But she wants you to start with paleo. And her whole point with using the word quiet, is that she removes those foods that are inflammatory or that have the anti-nutrients or that have like high histamine for people with histamine issues. She sticks with the safer foods that are not less toxic and are less likely to cause problems. So if you want to try like a paleo diet, but yet you have food sensitivities or you're concerned that you might not be successful because you just aren't getting where you need to go, you may have some things in your diet that are still kind of not neurotoxic to you. So her diet, and she tells you exactly what to eat, what to avoid. Her diet eliminates all that. But she tells you, like, you spend this much time doing paleo. Like, she doesn't want you to do like what I did, which is go cold turkey into carnivore.
Yeah, which is good advice. I was doing keto a little bit on and off, but I know of a lot of people who are like, I'm just going to go right into it, and then you end up failing. Or they say carnivore didn't work for me, and I'm like, eh. So I really like her approach. It's so specific too. You don't have to like guess and say, maybe I'll do this. Just do exactly what she says here. Follow the chart. Yeah.
Yeah. So she says quiet paleo for 6 weeks, but if you're doing okay, you can fast track. She says if you're feeling better, and she wants you to track your glucose while you're doing this. So at least on the paleo portion, you can track your ketones too when you start getting into the ketogenic diets. But, she basically is like, she wants you to go on whatever's going to get you the results and be as least restrictive, but still give you the results. And she even recommends, if you're doing really well, like say you're on the quiet keto and you're doing extremely well and your symptoms have resolved and you want to try to expand your diet again and maybe try to go back up to paleo, she gives you guidelines on how to do that.
Right.
Yeah.
It's almost the last section of the book could have been a book in itself. So you're getting some good value here because like she's got the quiet keto food list, meat, food, seafood, poultry, fruits, non-starchy vegetables. It has all of that. But then if you go even further, it actually has tables of meal plans that are very specific. So like the quiet keto meal plan. And recipes, yeah. It's like a recipe book and plan and all in one. So
yeah, the meal plan has the page number of where each of the recipes is on.
Right.
Yeah. And she said that Patricia Daly, she's the co-author of the Ketogenic Kitchen, and she's a nutrition therapist, is the one who helped her with these recipes. They created these recipes for the book.
Right. And she says it's patriciadaly.com, internationally recognized nutrition therapist.
And she specializes in the practical implementation of metabolic health protocols, and who credits the ketogenic diet for helping to quiet an aggressive case of eye cancer she was diagnosed with 15 years ago. So she's born in Switzerland, lives in Ireland. And so she said that her recipes have a distinctive European flair. But so she contributed to the recipes in the book. But she did mention, I just wanted to point out, page 302, I just kind of highlighted, she mentioned medicines are designed to interfere with normal biology. And that was a tiny little sentence, but I thought it was a really powerful statement. And it makes me want to make sure that I continue to work off getting off of medications. I'm down to 3.
Yeah.
My list was about 30 before I started the carnivore diet. But it's true. Yeah. The medications are designed to interfere with normal biology. So when you have the correct diet, it's correcting you so that you can actually, hopefully don't need to be on medications. But some people do. I mean, it depends on how severe your mental illness is,
Right. And she even said that there are some cases
Yeah,
for it. One other really important note on the medication was, um, please do not change your medication plan without professional guidance, and never
correct.
stop any psychiatric medications abruptly. I don't know if a lot of people are aware. I get that question a lot on my thing. When did you stop your medication? It's so important that you do that properly and you
And then
talk to your.
wean off, yes, with a doctor.
Yeah, it can be very dangerous if you don't.
Yeah, that's definitely. And definitely if your doctor does not support what you're doing, I would be looking for a different doctor.
Yeah. That was a question we had for Dr. Hampton when we did our meetup, and that was the answer: get another doctor.
Yeah, exactly. I was just talking today to the front desk person. I had my teeth cleaned and my dentist, and she has an autoimmune disease and she's got other health issues, but she was telling me that her doctor keeps trying to push a statin on her
Oh,
and she's refusing. And it's like every time she goes to the doctor, it's like statin, statin, statin. And I told her, I said, sounds like it's time to find a new doctor. That's If your doctor won't respect your individual choices for your own, what you want to put in your body, and I wouldn't go to that doctor.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah. The statin thing just drives me nuts. It's just there's got to be some incentive program or commission program or something going on there. I just hear that so much, myself included,
A
in my
big
30s.
moneymaker.
Yeah, they push it so hard, and for the
Yeah, well,
value you get out of it,
they keep changing the normal ranges. So before you know it, you're gonna have 20-year-olds on statins. I
right?
think the goal is to get everybody on statins.
That's just crazy.
I had another slide that I just threw in just because I thought it was kind of cool. Do you remember the part where she did Google Trends and she showed the Google Trends for the vegan diet, vegetarian diet? I don't know if you remember that,
I
but
don't know.
she showed a chart. I forget. I should have written down what page it's on. But she was showing this like upswing in the trends. This is like what people search for on Google.
Right?
And so I decided today to search for vegan diet, vegetarian diet, but also carnivore diet.
Oh,
And so the yellow is the carnivore diet. So you can see, and that so
yeah.
the blue was the vegan, the red was vegetarian. So the vegan diet did have a spike. This is like 2017,
Wow, must have been
but
a
both of
documentary or
them
something.
have been trending down. And then as you can see, the carnivore diet was like flatlined at 0 up until like September-ish of 2017. And it has been trending upward. The top line there is basically the peak interest.
Wow.
So there was back in 2017, the vegan diet hit peak interest, but then it has dramatically dropped. And we are down a little bit from the peak, but we have work to do.
Right.
We are seriously beating out now vegetarian and veganism
That is
when it
really
comes to
cool.
Google Trends.
Yeah. Wow.
So we need, it just tells me, to me, that inspires me to keep working and to keep doing what we're doing.
Absolutely, and I've had this notion for a while. Like it seems like carnivore spreading more and more. I don't know. I'm having more. It's hard for me to say because it's all I talk about all the time. But just people coming up to me in general, friends and family that are talking
Yeah.
about it more and more that wouldn't have otherwise.
Well, it's
So,
not your imagination. This graph confirms it.
yeah, absolutely.
I wonder how many of them are Googling you
Right.
or Dr. Barry, or it was cool. So I was down south and visiting with family and everything. I got to talk to a lot. Well, my southern family was a little baffled by my diet. I was out for 5 days. I was traveling and I stuck with the carnivore diet through the whole
Yay.
thing. Did
Good
not
job.
eat at all. And went out to the store. I made my own food, which when it comes to Southerners in the Southern family, to have you come and cook for yourself in their home, that's like, what? I need to cook for you. But no,
Right.
I didn't. I cooked for myself, made steaks, but I got a chance to share about the carnivore diet with my cousin's daughter, who is a speech pathologist, and she works with a lot of elderly. She's concerned about their dementia. She's concerned about their diet. She's really focused on diet, and she was fascinated. She looked up Dr. Barry and Dr. Baker and Dr. Chafee. I sent her the interviews with Cal Kramer. Um, that Dr. Chafee and Dr. Baker did. So it's like the word is getting out there. She had never heard of it. So now she's investigating it and learning about it. So the more we talk about it, new people, there's still so many people out there that are like, I've never heard of this.
Right.
It sounds crazy, but I want to look into this.
Yeah. It seems like they're getting more open-minded. Over the weekend, we had the big meetup at Montello Theater with Dr. Hampton.
Mm-hmm.
It was going to be a carnivore meetup, but then we opened it to the public. And Lynn, it was awesome because we had so many people.
I love it.
That they were there. They like, I know keto, but I don't know what this carnivore thing is. I don't know what this
Right.
proper human diet was. And they were interested. And a bunch of them came up to me afterwards and was asking for more information. So just like you, send them to Dr. Barry and Dr. Chafee and those guys.
Yeah. And I love it when people in healthcare catch the bug.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, to think that someone, who is working with elderly people and in healthcare is really trying. I mean, that's the thing. Just because someone's in healthcare doesn't mean that they care. They do care. And there's a lot of people out there that know that there's something wrong. Just don't know what the answer is.
Right.
Yeah.
Hey, one other thing I wanted to mention was Dr. Tony Hampton introduced me to Dr. Eid, which is awesome. If people that are watching this right now, if you want to learn more about this, you can, of course, visit Dr. Eid's website. We'll have a link to that in the description below. But she's also done quite a few videos with the folks over at Metabolic Mind, which is a YouTube channel. It's run by Dr. Brett Shear. It's wonderful, absolutely wonderful YouTube channel. And they talk about this stuff almost exclusively.
Yeah. Do you want to give the name of Dr. Eid's website again for people who came in later?
Yes, it was. Let me just double check here. I don't want to mess it up. Diagnosisdiet.com.
Okay.
Dr. Georgia Eid, diagnosisdiet.com.
Okay. We'll both put it in the links in our description on our channel. So
yeah,
you can check it out there.
Good stuff.
Yeah. So, and I know we've got a lot of comments. I haven't been able to really monitor it very carefully.
Yeah, no, it's always hard to keep track.
Yeah. Oh, Nurse Kim said there's 5 nurses on her unit who are either carnivore or considering it. Excellent. So we got some carnivore evangelists out there. So yeah, excellent. So yeah, we were busy talking and we don't have anyone behind the scenes monitoring. So I didn't see if there were any questions. Let me quickly scroll through here. And
yeah, shout out Bill Nuts in the chat and my buddy Brett, who's your carnivore.
Yeah, I recognize a lot of people here in the chat. It's awesome. It looks like there's a lot of them talking amongst themselves, which is fantastic.
Yeah, Rick's here too, 40-year carnivore.
That's right. Oh, yeah, I got my fellow Washingtonian. Well, I've got my viewer Jude, who's from Washington State.
Nice.
Offered to bring me some quail eggs.
Oh.
Because quail eggs, the entire quail egg is low histamine. So
really?
I've been wanting to try quail eggs.
Have you ever had an ostrich egg?
I haven't. It sounds like, I don't know. Can one person eat a whole ostrich?
I don't know. Someone commented yesterday and they said, Carrie, you should make up a power bowl with an ostrich egg. And I was like,
oh my word.
Be a fun YouTube video. And then I'm like, I don't even know where I would get an ostrich egg from. So maybe it's not a good idea.
I have no idea either. Yeah. My only issue with traveling turned out to be yesterday in the airport in Dallas. I couldn't find, I didn't cheat, but I got this omelet and it was all meat. But I have a feeling that it was cooked in seed oils and I ended up with a bit of an upset tummy, but it wasn't too bad. I found out that I could not find Chomp's beef sticks anywhere in Texas or Louisiana.
Wow.
So I couldn't find clean beef sticks or anything in either state. Not that I looked at the whole state, but
Right.
Yeah.
When we went to film Dr. Barry, bless my wife's heart, she packed for me because I wouldn't have been prepared at all. She packs a power bowl for me. That was before I was doing Lion Diet.
Oh, nice.
So I had beef butter, bacon, eggs in a bowl, and I ate it cold, and it was delicious.
Sounds good. So, all right. Well, I think, do we have anything else to talk about? Are we wrapping it up with the book?
I think we're good. This has been great. change your diet, change your mind. Dr. Georgia Eid. We'll have some links in the description below. And this has been fun, Lynn. Thank you so much. Again,
Yeah.
anyone watching from my channel, if you're not subscribed to Lynn, you're missing out. She's awesome. Go check out her channel. I have a link in the description below. And yeah, I think we could leave it at that.
Yeah, I thank everybody that joined, and it was great to have people here, and I hope that we provided some benefit and encouraged you to get the book and really dig into it. It's really, I'm keeping this, honestly, this is going to be part of my resource library.
Yeah.
This is not just a read it and set it aside. This is a resource because she covers so much in here and so many things that you want to know about the carnivore diet. And like Carrie said, addressing people's concerns. What nutrients do you need? Where can you get those nutrients? How does this food impact your body? How does it impact your brain? I mean, everything I can think of that I would want to know, she answers in here.
It's incredible. She said she spent like 10 years working on this.
I believe it.
Yeah, I'm like so much credit because I know how difficult this is just doing the documentary. I can't imagine with the amount of sources she has just in the back of this book. It's incredible.
Yeah, it's kind of like an all-in-one resource for the carnivore diet. Even if it is specifically about mental health, she covers so much that even if you don't have mental health issues, I would still use this as a resource.
Yeah, same for me. I'm keeping it.
Yeah.
Good stuff. Well, thank you so much, Lynn. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. This has been great.
Yep. Thank you very much, everyone. All right. I'm going to call it a night. And thank you, Carrie.
Thanks, Lynn. Bye, everyone. Have a good night.
Bye, everyone.